Hi there. Today I'm going to talk about when INFPs attack. And yeah, that's kind of a weird topic. Everyone would consider INFPs to be peace-loving and conflict avoidant, and by and large we are. But there are times that we have, and we do get into altercations, and I'll go into some of those today. But first, a couple of quick preamble things. One is that in past videos, I've talked about the INFP does this and INFPs do that. I've used the term INFP as proxy to talk about that I do this and I do that. Of course, I do not speak for all INFPs. We're different people, do things differently. We share a cognitive stack. And in line with that, I wanted also to say that there are different INFPs that will have different approaches to things. So a lot of what I talk about today is more personally relatable to me, and they may or may not resonate with you. If they don't resonate with you, it doesn't mean you're not an INFP. It just means that you do things differently. And therefore, please leave something in the comments if stuff does resonate, and or if you have anything relevant or interesting or even not interesting to say. I look forward to hearing from you. But to the main event. When INFPs attack, the answer is yes. Very rarely, we will avoid conflict as much as possible. It's a big world. If there's someone we have a problem with, we go our separate ways. We're in different places, different social circles, and I give no energy or attention to the other person with whom I have a conflict, and that's all good. However, there are times that there is social conflict that's required. And I'll just talk about social conflict. I'm not going to get into fisticuffs. We're adults here. We shouldn't be doing that kind of thing as adults anyway. So INFPs do have what I believe is one of the worst stacks for conflict. Because if you look at it, we've got FI, so we know how we feel. Well, that's great. It's not really helpful for a conflict. If you know you feel over the top angry and you're not able to engage in a social conflict in a good way because you're too distracted by being too emotional, that's no good. We've got SE polar, so we're not going to be able to summon a strong presence and intimidate with the way that we appear. We've got TI demon, so we're not going to be able to rationalize our way to show through logic that someone else is provably wrong. We've got FE ignoring, so when it comes to trying to rally the society to be around us and come to our aid to show that someone else should have shame based on how they've behaved, we're FE ignoring. So, it's just not a good stack for conflict. Hence, conflict avoidance. So when do we engage in conflicts? Well, one of the times that happens is when there's some sort of an egregious violation of our morals or values. And that happened a couple of years back, for instance, with a neighbor where something really out of line happened. And the neighbor was sort of indirectly responsible for someone who's vulnerable getting hurt. And at that point, I considered it for a bit, and nobody else was going to step up. So I went to the neighbor's house and knocked on the door and absolutely chewed them out, saying, "This is the problem. This is what you need to do to fix it. No excuses, no nothing, just get off your duff and fix the problem." And they gave kind of like a yeah, but, and I gave no quarter to that. And in the end, I think they were so surprised by this mild-mannered neighbor of a long time coming to them, with like hell in their eyes to say, you've got to do something about this, that they complied and all was good. But it was the only reason I did that was because I was in a place of righteous correctness. It was the virtuous and proper thing to do. there is another situation that a certain MBTI figurehead out there has talked about, where it's that INFPs are the master of the whispering campaign, that they'll go after someone with kind of a background assassination, of character assassination going on. And as a lot of things said by that figurehead, it's only partly true. The true part is that, yes, an INFP will go behind the back of a certain person to other people and say, look, X is a bad person. It's not because it's some sort of character assassination campaign. At least with a healthy INFP such as myself, I've done this repeatedly because I've seen someone who is provably a bad person or not a good person, two different classifications, but someone who is absolutely irredeemably proven to be a bad person. They get into some area where they're into the social circle that I'm in. I feel obligated to go to the people that I know to say, look out for such and so. They are a bad person. Stay away from that person. Do not mess with them. They're just not, you're going to have a bad outcome if you mix it up or mix in with that person. I've done that a couple times here and there, generally once with someone who was in an unstable situation where they could potentially blow back at anyone at any time. The other two cases that I recall off the top of my head where I've done it, one got pushed out of the community that they were in the separate community, for I think what's obvious reasons, and the other one's in prison. So it's not something that I do lightly when I go to people in my social circles and say, this person is a bad person. They're provably a bad person. Stay away, because bad things will happen if you associate with them. And indeed, it's not NI, it's proven experience that I've seen this, I know how it turns out. Don't get involved. So there is a third case that I wanted to get into that's happened when INFPs attack, and this doesn't look like an attack at all. There's this misnomer that INFPs do this FI attack of like, well, I'm a vegan and you're not a vegan, therefore you're a wrong, bad, evil person. That is just crude and not something I hope any INFP would do once they've become an adult. FI is much more refinable than that. And you combine it with any, and you end up doing a lot more complex things where you're trying to work out a situation to your favor. And that's which brought about this whole discussion in the first place, because I'd inadvertently done something that offended someone else recently. And when that person saw it and they pointed out to me, like, what's the deal here? I put together a response, and when I looked at it, I thought, this looks really familiar. I've gone down this road before. And so I've abstracted it to say, this is how an INFP does a sophisticated FI attack. It's not an attack at all. In fact, it looks very different, but it is sort of a setup just to be like, okay, let me coil up and see what happens, and that will dictate my next reaction. And that is, first, I will say, I start the preamble with, there was not a malicious intent here. I was not acting in bad faith. I've made amends to what the problem is, so I fixed the issue to demonstrate my good character. I have no desire for conflict here. So this is all set up to say, in words and in deed, I've fixed the issue and I've communicated to you that I wish no harm. And this is important regardless of who the other person is, regardless of whether or not I would want a conflict with that person or not, if I liked them or if I didn't. That doesn't matter. This is all so that I can regain a moral high ground from which I can act. If I don't do this, then I'm the jerk. I'm the bad person. And I cannot start a conflict coming from that point. It just wouldn't be right. So I come in, I have no desire for conflict. And so let us agree that this is now behind us. So it expects a response of some sort, like, do this thing for me to acknowledge that we're now okay. The thing being, and it's never come to this, but the thing being that if someone says, well, no, that's not good enough, this is not okay, I'm coming after you no matter what, I now have the moral high ground. So if you do not show mercy, if you do not acknowledge or meet me in some way with this olive branch, then you are the bad person. And once you are that bad person, then we can proceed to whatever happens next. That whatever happens next, fortunately, has never happened. The people I've had in social circles, for as long as I remember, have all been reasonable enough that you get to this point of, I fixed the problem, I don't want conflict, I've made amends, this was a mistake, or I'm not acting in bad faith here. That's good enough. If it were to go to a next step, who knows what would happen next? I would posit that first it would always be avoidance. If somebody were like, no, that's good enough, it'd be like, well, bye. And, don't deal with the person again. But if there was a forced conflict, I would now feel justified to do whatever would come next. Fortunately, again, it would be anything but a conflict. But if a conflict were forced, then I would feel justified in responding to it. Anyway, it's a weird way of approaching things, so that's where I thought I would point it out. And these are some of the situations where you can see an INFP pressed into conflict. So you have these FI attacks that don't look like an attack at all. It's more of a circular way of brokering a peace, but being prepared or preparing for a worse alternative. Fortunately, again, which has not come. So anyway, I hope you find this interesting. Please feel free to comment, and I have more things coming up at some point in the near future. So thanks for watching.